The recycling chute on level 47 of orbital station Kairos had been jammed for 3 hours, and nobody cared except Mara Voss. She knelt in the narrow maintenance corridor, her worn jumpsuit stained with lubricant and chemical residue, prying at the compacted mass of waste with a plasma torch set to its lowest setting. The air was thick with the smell of burned plastic and ozone. Her knees ached against the metal grating. She was 26 years old, and some days she felt twice that. "Move faster, human," came a chittering voice from behind her. Mara didn't need to turn around to know it was Rix, one of the Vethral supervisors. The insectoid alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, with compound eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian and mandibles that clicked with irritation. "The docking bay needs to be spotless in 2 hours. Imperial delegation arriving." "I'm working as fast as I can," Mara said, keeping her voice neutral. She'd learned long ago that emotion only made things worse with the Vethral. They interpreted any display of feeling as weakness or insubordination. "Your species," Rix clicked, "always has excuses. This is why humans will never advance beyond service roles. No discipline, no efficiency." Mara bit down on her tongue and returned to her work. The torch finally cut through the blockage, and the chute groaned back to life with a mechanical wheeze. She stood, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of grease across her temple. "Finished," she said. Rix's antennae twitched in what might have been acknowledgement or dismissal. "Report to Bay 7. The floors need polishing before the Imperials arrive. I just came off a 12-hour shift. Are you refusing assignment?" Mara's jaw tightened. Refusing assignment meant docked pay. Docked pay meant she didn't eat tomorrow. "No, I'll report to Bay 7. Rix turned and skittered away on 6 legs, leaving Mara alone in the corridor. She allowed herself one moment, just one, to close her eyes and breathe. Then she gathered her equipment and headed toward the docking bays. Orbital Station Kairos was a transit hub on the outer rim of Galactic Coalition space, a massive ring of metal and composite materials that served as a waypoint for traders, diplomats, and travelers from hundreds of worlds. It had been Mara's home for 8 years, ever since the war that had devastated Earth's colonies had left her orphaned at 18. She'd drifted from station to station, taking whatever work she could find, always on the edges of a society that barely acknowledged her existence. Humans were commonplace enough in Coalition space. There were maybe 100 on Kairos alone, but they occupied the lowest rungs of the social ladder. The Treaty of Solara had ended the human-Vexar War 15 years ago, but it had also established humanity's position as a client species. Humans could work, could trade, could even own property if they accumulated enough credits. But they had no voting rights in the Coalition Assembly, no representation, no real power, and they certainly didn't form bonds. Mara tried not to think about that as she made her way through the station's maze of corridors. The bond was a telepathic connection between compatible individuals, a psychic link that transcended language and species. It was rare, sacred, and, according to every piece of Coalition propaganda, the highest form of relationship achievable in the known universe. Bonded pairs could share thoughts, emotions, even physical sensations. They became 2 parts of a greater whole. But forming a bond required genetic compatibility, which was rare enough. It also required the bonding ceremony itself, which took place in specialized facilities and cost more credits than Mara would earn in 10 lifetimes. The Coalition maintained strict controls over who could access bonding facilities. You needed either enormous wealth, political connections, or distinguished military service. Humans had none of those things. Bay 7 was already bustling with activity when Mara arrived. The massive docking platform could accommodate ships up to cruiser class, and today it was being prepared for something special. A crimson carpet had been rolled out from the airlock to the station's inner ring. Holographic banners displaying the Coalition's symbol, a circle of stars surrounding a central sun, flickered in the recycled air. Security personnel in sleek armor stood at attention, their weapons powered down but prominently displayed. Mara joined 3 other human cleaners already working on the floor. She recognized 2 of them, Javi, a thin man in his 40s with graying hair, and Sarah, a young woman barely out of her teens who'd arrived on Kairos 6 months ago. The third was a stranger, but his worn jumpsuit and defeated posture marked him as one of them. "What's all this about?" Mara asked as she powered up her floor polisher. Javi glanced around nervously before answering. "Imperial delegation from the Draxian Coalition. Real high-level stuff. There's a rumor the Emperor himself might be coming." Mara raised her eyebrows. The Draxian Coalition was one of the Coalition's most powerful member states, controlling nearly 100 star systems and commanding one of the largest military fleets in known space. The Draxians were a warrior culture, humanoid in basic shape, but distinctly alien in every other way. They stood 8 to 9 feet tall, with metallic skin that ranged from silver to deep bronze, eyes that glowed with inner light, and a telepathic sensitivity that made them natural candidates for bonding. "The Emperor," Sarah breathed, her eyes wide. "I heard he's never formed a bond. Everyone says he's waiting for the perfect match." "Everyone says a lot of things," Javi muttered. "Keep your heads down and do your work. Last thing we need is to attract attention from Draxian nobility." They worked in silence for the next hour, polishing the deck plates until they gleamed like mirrors. Other workers, Vethril, Karathi, even a few elegant Sylphians with their translucent skin and musical voices, bustled around them, arranging decorations and running final security checks. None of them spoke to the human cleaners. None of them even looked at the humans unless it was to point out a missed spot or demand faster work. Mara was used to it. Invisibility was survival. The station's announcement system chimed with a melodious tone that echoed through the bay. "Attention all personnel. Imperial transport approaching. All non-essential workers are to clear the docking area immediately." "That's us," Javi said, already moving toward the exit. "Come on." But Mara's polisher had just died, its power cell drained. She knelt to swap it out, fingers working quickly on the release mechanism. The others were already halfway to the corridor when she heard the voice. "You, human!" She looked up to find a Karathi overseer staring down at her. The Karathi were reptilian, with scales that shimmered in shades of blue and green and eyes that could track movement with predatory precision. This one wore the silver insignia of station security. "The floor has streaks," the Karathi said, pointing with a clawed hand. "Fix it, now!" Mara followed his gesture and saw nothing. The floor was immaculate, but arguing would accomplish nothing. "Yes, sir." She grabbed a cleaning cloth and approached the spot he'd indicated, aware that the bay was emptying rapidly. The announcement chimed again. "Imperial transport docking in 2 minutes." Her hands moved quickly, buffing at invisible imperfections while her heart hammered against her ribs. She needed to get out of here before... The airlock cycled with a deep, resonant boom. Mara froze, still on her knees, cloth in hand. She was alone on the deck now. The Karathi overseer had vanished. The other workers had retreated to the observation galleries above. She was exposed, visible, exactly where she shouldn't be. The airlock doors opened with a hydraulic hiss. What emerged first was a wall of heat. Not physical heat, but something psychic, a pressure that made the air itself seem to shimmer. Mara felt it against her skin like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Her breath caught in her throat. Then came the guards. They were Draxian warriors, each standing nearly 9 feet tall in their ceremonial armor. The armor was black as void, traced with lines of energy that pulsed like captured lightning. Their faces were exposed, showing metallic skin the color of burnished copper and eyes that glowed amber gold. They moved in perfect synchronization, forming 2 lines that extended from the airlock into the station. Behind them came the nobles. Mara had seen wealthy aliens before, but never like this. They wore robes that seemed woven from starlight itself, materials that shifted color with every movement. Jewels that could have purchased entire stations glittered at their throats and wrists. They moved with the casual arrogance of beings who had never known want, never known fear, never known what it meant to be powerless. And then he appeared. Emperor Kael'thar of the Draxian Coalition stepped through the airlock, and the universe seemed to bend around him. He was massive even by Draxian standards, easily 9.5 feet tall, with skin the color of polished steel. His eyes glowed with an intensity that bordered on painful to look at directly, not amber like his guards, but a pure, radiant silver. He wore no crown, but he didn't need one. Power radiated from him in waves that Mara could feel in her bones. His armor was simpler than his guards, black and unadorned except for a single symbol over his heart, a star surrounded by lightning. Every being in the observation galleries had dropped to their knees in respect. The station's commander, a dignified Sylphian, practically prostrated herself, and Mara, forgotten on the docking bay floor, remained frozen in place with a cleaning cloth in her hands. For a moment, she thought she might escape notice. The Emperor's gaze swept across the bay, taking in the carefully arranged welcome, the bowing officials, the elaborate decorations. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone and starlight. Then his eyes locked onto hers. The universe stopped. Mara couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The Emperor's silver gaze held her pinned like a specimen under glass. His eyes widened fractionally. Surprise? Impossible. And his entire body went rigid. The nobles around him faltered in their procession. The guards' hands moved toward their weapons. One of the nobles, a Draxian woman with skin like polished gold and elaborate braids threaded with gems, followed the Emperor's gaze down to where Mara knelt. The woman's expression shifted from confusion to disgust. A human? The woman's voice carried across the silent bay, dripping with contempt. Why is there a human on the receiving deck? This is an insult to His Imperial Majesty. The station commander scrambled forward, her translucent face flushed with mortification. Your Grace, I apologize profusely. The cleaning staff should have been cleared out before— Cleaning staff? Another noble, this one male with skin like dark bronze, laughed, a harsh, metallic sound. This creature was on its knees scrubbing floors while the Emperor arrived. This is how humans honor their betters? Mara's face burned. She started to rise, to retreat, to become invisible again as she'd learned to do. Stay where you are. The Emperor's voice was not loud, but it resonated through the bay like a bell struck in a cathedral. Everyone froze. He took one step forward, then another, descending from the airlock ramp. Each footfall was deliberate, measured. His eyes never left Mara's face. The golden-skinned noblewoman reached out to touch his arm. Your Majesty, surely you're not— I said stay where you are. He wasn't speaking to the noblewoman. He was speaking to Mara. Terror and confusion warred in Mara's chest. She remained frozen, still on her knees, as the Emperor of the Draxian Coalition crossed the polished floor toward her. The silence was so complete she could hear the mechanical hum of the station's life support systems. 200 beings watched from the galleries. None of them breathed. Kael'thar stopped 3 feet away from her. This close, Mara could see details she'd missed from a distance. The faint scars on his metallic skin, the way energy seemed to crackle just beneath its surface, the absolute intensity of those glowing silver eyes. He radiated power like a sun radiated heat. Everything about him screamed danger, authority, dominion. Stand, he said quietly. Mara's legs shook as she rose. She barely came up to the center of his chest. Her stained jumpsuit, her tangled hair, her grease-smudged face. She had never felt more small, more insignificant, more utterly out of place. The Emperor stared at her as if she were the most important thing in the universe. What is your name? His voice was deep, resonant, but there was something in it she couldn't identify. Something that might have been wonder. Mara. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. Mara Voss. Mara Voss, he repeated, as if testing how the syllables felt. Then he did something that sent shockwaves through the entire assembly. He went down on one knee. Gasps erupted from the galleries. The golden noblewoman made a strangled sound of disbelief. The station commander looked like she might faint. Emperor Kael'thar, ruler of 100 star systems, commander of the most powerful fleet in Coalition space, knelt before a human janitor. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the bay. You are my bond. The words hung in the air like a pronouncement of cosmic law. Mara's mind went blank. This wasn't possible. This wasn't— No, the golden noblewoman said sharply. Your Majesty, you must be mistaken. A human cannot— I am not mistaken, Vera. The Emperor's eyes never left Mara's face. The recognition is absolute. The bond calls to me through her as clearly as my own heartbeat. But she has no lineage. Vera's voice was rising, losing its calculated composure. No rank, no credits, no training. She's a cleaning servant. This is impossible. And yet, Kelthar said softly, here we stand. He reached out slowly, giving Mara time to pull away if she wanted to. His hand was enormous, the metallic skin warm like sun-heated stone. When his fingers gently touched her cheek, Mara felt something surge through her. A connection, a recognition, a rightness that transcended explanation. It was like coming home to a place she'd never been, finding something she hadn't known she'd lost. Tears sprang to her eyes without permission. The Emperor's expression softened fractionally. You feel it too. It wasn't a question, but Mara found herself nodding anyway. She did feel it. Impossibly, incomprehensibly, she felt it. A thread of connection linking her consciousness to his. A door that had been locked her entire life, suddenly standing open. This is madness, the bronze-skinned noble declared. Your Majesty, I beg you to reconsider. The political implications alone are irrelevant. Kelthar rose to his full height, though his hand remained gentle on Mara's face. When he turned to address the assembled nobles and officials, his voice carried the weight of absolute command. The bond is sacred. It transcends politics, wealth, and status. It is the most fundamental truth of our existence. Are you suggesting I should deny it? No one dared answer. This human, he continued, and the word human suddenly sounded different in his mouth. Not a diminishment, but a simple statement of fact, is my destined bond. That makes her under my protection. Anyone who offers her insult offers it to me personally. His eyes glowed brighter, and the psychic pressure in the room intensified. Is that understood? A chorus of hasty affirmations rippled through the assembly. Vera, however, wasn't finished. Your Majesty, even if what you claim is true, the girl has no resources. The bonding ceremony requires access to the royal sanctum. The preparation alone costs more credits than a human could earn in multiple lifetimes. How do you propose? She is under my sponsorship, Kelthar interrupted. All expenses will be covered by the Imperial Treasury. All preparations will be handled by my personal staff. The ceremony will take place within the month. He looked back down at Mara, and something in his expression gentled. If she accepts. If she accepts. The words filtered through the shock that had frozen Mara's mind. He was asking. This being who could command fleets, who ruled star systems, who had literally just brought every noble in the room to heel with a look. He was asking her permission. I don't understand, Mara whispered. Why me? I'm nobody. I clean floors and fix recycling chutes. I don't even have enough credits for next month's rations. You are my bond, Kelthar said simply, as if that explained everything. The universe itself has chosen you. Your circumstances are temporary and easily remedied. Your connection to me is eternal and irreplaceable. His thumb traced a gentle line across her cheekbone, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. But the choice is yours, Mara Voss. I will not compel you. If you wish to walk away, I will ensure you want for nothing in your life, and I will never trouble you again. Mara's mind was spinning. This morning, she'd woken up in her tiny quarters on level 52, dreading another shift of mockery and exhaustion. She'd eaten her ration bars and drunk recycled water and accepted that this was her life. Invisible, powerless, forgotten. Now the Emperor of the Draxian Coalition knelt before her, offering everything. And the terrifying part was that some deep part of her, some instinct she hadn't known she possessed, was screaming at her to say yes. The connection she felt humming between them wasn't one-sided. It was real. It was calling to something fundamental in her nature. But the rational part of her mind, the part that had kept her alive for 8 years in a hostile universe, recognized the enormous target this would paint on her back. The way Vera was looking at her, the fury barely contained behind those golden features, promised that accepting this offer would make her powerful enemies. I need time, Mara heard herself say. I need to think. Disappointment flickered across Kelthar's face, but he nodded. You shall have it. 1 week. I will remain on this station until you've made your decision. He turned to the station commander, who still looked on the verge of collapse. "Prepare quarters for my bondmate. She is to be treated with all the respect due to imperial family. Anyone who fails in this duty will answer to me personally." "Of course, Your Majesty," the commander stammered. "Immediately. And arrange a meeting for tomorrow," Caelthar continued. "Private, just the two of us. She deserves to know who I am beyond the titles and the crown." He looked back at Mara one more time, and his expression was so open, so vulnerable, that it stole her breath. "I am not asking you to love me, Mara Voss, only to give me the chance to show you what we could be together." Then he rose, turned, and strode back toward his retinue. The nobles fell into formation around him, but Mara saw the glances they shot back at her. Some curious, some hostile, all calculating. Vera's expression promised future complications. The assembly processed out of the bay, leaving Mara standing alone on the polished floor with a cleaning cloth still clutched in her hand. She had just been claimed by an emperor, and she had absolutely no idea what came next. The quarters they assigned her were on level 10, the residential section reserved for dignitaries and high-ranking officials. Mara had never been above level 20 in her entire time on Kairos. She didn't belong here among the wide corridors and soft lighting and air that smelled of flowers instead of recycled chemicals. 2 Draxian guards escorted her. They maintained a respectful distance, their expressions neutral, but she could feel their eyes tracking her every movement. Protecting her? Watching her? Both? The door to her new quarters opened at her approach, responding to whatever authorization had been coded into the station system. The space beyond made her stomach drop. It was enormous. Her old quarters could have fit in the bathroom. The main room featured a genuine window, not a holographic screen, but actual transparent alloy showing the stars beyond the station. Real furniture, upholstered in materials she couldn't name, arranged around a low table. A sleeping area with a bed that looked softer than anything she'd ever touched. And was that a food synthesizer? One of the expensive models that could create actual fresh meals? Mara walked slowly into the space, afraid that if she moved too quickly, the illusion would shatter. Behind her, one of the guards spoke. "We will be stationed outside your door. If you require anything, simply call. The Emperor has ordered that all your needs be met without question." "Thank you," Mara managed. The door closed, leaving her alone. She stood in the center of the room, still wearing her stained jumpsuit, and tried to process the last 3 hours of her life. It felt like a dream. Any moment she would wake up in her cramped bunk on level 52, and this would all dissolve into absurdity. But the connection still hummed at the edge of her awareness. The bond, impossible as it seemed, was real. She could feel it, a thread of warmth linking her to something vast and powerful somewhere else in the station. Emperor Caelthar, her bond. The thought should have been absurd. It should have been impossible. So why did it feel like the truest thing she'd ever known? Mara walked to the window and pressed her hand against the cool alloy. Beyond, the stars turned in their eternal dance, vast and indifferent. She was one tiny human in a galaxy of trillions. Yesterday she'd been invisible, powerless, insignificant. Today an emperor had knelt before her. Tomorrow she would have to decide whether to step into the light and all the danger that came with it. But tonight, for the first time in 8 years, Mara Voss allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was worth more than they'd told her. Maybe the universe had been wrong about her all along. Mara didn't sleep. She lay in the impossibly soft bed, staring at the ceiling while her mind raced in circles. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the Emperor's face, that expression of wonder when he'd looked at her, as if she were something precious beyond measure. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense. Around Oro 400 station time, she gave up on rest and moved to the sitting area. The food synthesizer proved surprisingly intuitive, and within minutes she had a cup of something that tasted like coffee but better, richer, smoother, with a warmth that spread through her chest. Real coffee, she realized, not the synthetic substitute she'd been drinking for years. She sipped it slowly, savoring every drop, and tried to organize her thoughts. The bond was real. She couldn't deny what she'd felt when Caelthar touched her face. That sense of recognition, of completeness, as if a part of her she hadn't known was missing had suddenly clicked into place. But real didn't mean safe. Real didn't mean wise. The way Vera had looked at her flashed through her memory. Fury and calculation behind those golden eyes. Mara had seen enough of station politics to recognize a dangerous enemy when she met one, and she'd apparently made one yesterday without even trying. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. The door interface lit up with a message. His Imperial Majesty Emperor Kylthar requests the honor of your presence for morning meal at 800. Transportation will be provided. Mara's hand tightened around the cup. Morning meal. A private meeting, as he'd promised. She had 3 hours to prepare herself to face him again, this time without the buffer of shock and adrenaline. She stood and headed toward what she assumed was the bathroom. What she found was more like a personal spa. The shower had 17 different settings. There were bottles of cleansing products that smelled like things she couldn't name, flowers that didn't grow on Earth, spices from worlds she'd never seen, towels so soft they felt like clouds. Mara stood under the hot water for longer than was probably appropriate, letting the heat soak into muscles that had been tense for years. When had she last had a real shower instead of the 30-second sonic cleanser in the communal facilities on level 52? The closet proved to be another revelation. Someone, the Emperor's staff she assumed, had stocked it with clothing. Not uniforms, not the cheap synthetic garments she was used to, but actual clothes in styles she'd seen worn by mid-level officials. Simple but well-made, in colors that complemented her skin tone. She chose a tunic and pants in deep blue, soft material that moved like water. They fit perfectly. Of course they did. The Emperor, who could read her soul through some cosmic connection, had probably known her exact measurements with a glance. By the time 0800 arrived, Mara looked more presentable than she had in years. Her dark hair, usually tangled and pulled back in a hasty knot, fell in clean waves around her shoulders. Her face, scrubbed clean of grease and grime, looked younger, almost like the girl she'd been before the war, before the orphaning, before survival had become her only goal. The door chimed. When she opened it, she found not the Draxian guards, but a Sylphian woman in elegant robes. The woman's translucent skin shimmered with opalescent light, and her eyes held a kindness that Mara hadn't expected. "Mara Voss," the woman said, her voice musical. "I am Lyria, First Chamberlain to His Imperial Majesty. If you're ready, I will escort you to the Emperor's private quarters." "I'm ready." Mara wasn't sure that was true, but she followed anyway. They traveled through corridors Mara had never seen, passing through security checkpoints, where guards snapped to attention at Lyria's approach. Other beings they passed in the halls stopped and stared at Mara with expressions ranging from curiosity to disbelief. News had spread, apparently. The human janitor claimed by an emperor. She could imagine the gossip rippling through the station. Lyria maintained a gentle stream of conversation as they walked, pointing out features of the station's architecture, commenting on the artwork displayed in the upper-level corridors. It took Mara several minutes to realize what the Chamberlain was doing, putting her at ease, treating her like a dignitary rather than an anomaly. "You're very kind," Mara said quietly. Lyria smiled. "The Emperor is a good judge of character. If he has recognized you as his bond, then you are worthy of respect regardless of your previous circumstances." She paused before a set of ornate doors flanked by 4 Draxian guards. "He is also, despite all appearances, nervous about this meeting. He has never formed a bond before. You are as much a mystery to him as he is to you." That thought, that the Emperor might be nervous, was so absurd that Mara almost laughed. But Lyria's expression was sincere. The doors opened. The Emperor's quarters were vast, but surprisingly sparse. No excessive decoration, no displays of wealth, just clean lines, functional furniture, and a wall of windows showing the stars beyond. Kylthar stood at those windows, hands clasped behind his back, silhouetted against the cosmos. He turned as she entered. In the light of day, or what passed for it on a space station, he was no less imposing. Still 9.5 feet of metallic skin and glowing silver eyes, still radiating power like a contained star. But something about his posture was different, less formal, more uncertain. "Mara Voss," he said. "Thank you for coming." "Your Majesty." Mara executed an awkward bow, unsure of the proper protocol. Kael'thar, he corrected gently. Here, in private, I am simply Kael'thar. Titles are for courts and councils. Between bondmates, there should be honesty. He gestured toward a low table where food had been laid out, not the elaborate feast she'd half expected, but simple fare. Bread, fruit, some kind of protein she didn't recognize. Please, sit, eat. I promise I will not bite. The attempt at humor was so unexpected that Mara smiled despite herself. She moved to the cushions arranged around the table and sat, acutely aware of his eyes tracking her every movement. Kael'thar folded himself down on the opposite side of the table with surprising grace for someone so large. Up close, Mara could see details she'd missed yesterday. The way his metallic skin wasn't entirely smooth, but textured, like brushed steel. The scars that marked his forearms and the side of his neck. The weariness that lived behind those glowing eyes. You didn't sleep, he observed. Neither did you, Mara replied, then immediately regretted it. You didn't contradict emperors. You didn't presume to know their state of mind. But Kael'thar only smiled slightly. No, I didn't. The bond connection is distracting when it's unfulfilled. I can feel you at the edge of my awareness, close enough to know you're there, too distant to truly understand. He poured her something from an elegant carafe, juice, sweet and cold. I imagine you feel the same. Mara did. That thread of warmth she'd noticed last night had persisted, a constant presence at the back of her mind. I don't understand it, she admitted. The bond, I mean. I thought it was supposed to be rare even among compatible species. Humans aren't even... We're not... Not what? Kael'thar's tone was gentle. Not worthy? Not evolved enough? Not valuable enough to merit such a connection? He leaned forward slightly. The universe disagrees. The bond does not care about politics or social hierarchies. It recognizes something deeper, a fundamental compatibility of souls. But why me? The question burst out before Mara could stop it. I'm nobody. I've accomplished nothing. I have no family, no connections, no value to anyone. You could have anyone in the galaxy. Why would the universe choose me for you? Kael'thar was quiet for a long moment, his glowing eyes studying her face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. May I tell you a story? He asked finally. Mara nodded. I am 143 years old, Kael'thar began. I have ruled the Draxian Coalition for 72 of those years, since my father fell in battle during the Vexar incursion. I have commanded fleets, negotiated treaties, executed traitors, and sentenced millions to death in defense of my people. I have more blood on my hands than you can imagine. He looked down at those hands, turning them as if seeing them for the first time. I am good at being emperor. I am efficient, decisive, ruthless when necessary. I have made my empire strong. He paused to take a drink, and Mara realized this was difficult for him, this admission, this vulnerability. But I am hollow, Kael'thar continued softly. I have spent a century surrounded by people who want something from me. Power, wealth, influence, favor. I have courtiers who would die at my command and schemers who would kill me if they thought they could succeed. I have advisors who tell me what I want to hear and enemies who tell me what I need to know. But in all that time, I have never had someone who simply sees me. Not the emperor, not the title, not the power. Just me. He met her eyes again, and the raw loneliness in his expression struck Mara like a physical blow. Yesterday, when I stepped onto that docking bay, I felt the bond recognition for the first time in my life. It pulled me toward you with a force I couldn't deny. And when I looked at you, kneeling on the floor in your stained jumpsuit, exhausted and forgotten, I saw someone who understands what it means to be invisible, someone who has survived not through power or privilege, but through resilience and strength of will. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I saw someone who might look at me and see a person instead of a throne. The words settled into the space between them, heavy with meaning. Mara's throat felt tight. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know being an emperor was lonely. Few do. Kael'thar attempted a smile. It is not something I can admit publicly. Leaders must appear strong, invulnerable. But here, with you, he trailed off, then seemed to shake himself. Forgive me. I did not bring you here to burden you with my problems. You deserve to know what you would be accepting if you agree to the bond. It is not all power and luxury. There will be danger. Vera, Mara said. Kael'thar's expression hardened. You noticed? Yes, Lady Vera of House Theron. She has been persistent in her belief that she would be my bondmate. Our families have been allied for generations. She is powerful, well-connected, and utterly convinced that I belong to her. He paused. She will not take your existence well. She already doesn't. Mara thought of that golden face twisted with fury. She looked at me like I was something she wanted to scrape off her shoe. I will not allow her to harm you, Kael'thar said with absolute certainty. But I cannot stop her from making your life difficult. There will be others like her. Nobles who resent your rise, factions who see you as a threat to their plans, enemies who will try to use you against me. If you accept the bond, you accept all of that. Mara pushed fruit around her plate, thinking. Yesterday she'd been invisible, safe in obscurity. Today she was discussing political assassination with an emperor. The contrast was dizzying. Why did you really come to this station? She asked. It's not exactly a major diplomatic hub. Kael'thar's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. Perceptive. There was to be a minor trade negotiation, hardly worthy of my personal attention, but I have been searching. For the last 20 years, I have visited every major station and colony world within our space, hoping to feel the bond recognition. My advisors call it foolishness. They insist I should simply choose a politically advantageous match and produce heirs. His jaw tightened. I refused. If I am to be bound to another soul for eternity, it will not be for politics. So you just kept looking. I kept looking. He met her eyes. And I found you. The weight of that statement settled over Mara. He'd been searching for her specifically, not for a bondmate, but for her. The universe had been pulling them toward this moment, this meeting, across years and star systems. It should have felt romantic. Instead, it felt terrifying. I need you to understand something, Mara said carefully. I don't know how to be whatever you need me to be. I can't do politics. I don't know the first thing about being a consort or whatever bondmates become. I'll embarrass you. I'll make mistakes. People will mock you for choosing someone like me. Let them mock. Kael'thar's voice was hard as steel. Anyone who judges my bondmate by her previous profession rather than her character is a fool, and I have no patience for fools. He reached across the table, slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. The touch sent warmth racing up her arm, that bond connection flaring bright. I am not asking you to be perfect. I am asking you to be yourself. That is all I want, all I have ever wanted. Mara looked down at their joined hands. His was so much larger than hers, metallic skin warm against her flesh. She should have felt overwhelmed. Instead, she felt safe. Tell me about the bonding ceremony, she said. What actually happens? Kael'thar settled back, though he didn't release her hand. The ceremony itself is simple. Two compatible individuals enter the royal sanctum, a specially prepared chamber that amplifies psychic energy. Within that space, we would open ourselves completely to each other. Mind to mind, soul to soul. Every memory, every emotion, every secret thought. Nothing hidden, nothing held back. If the compatibility is true, the bond solidifies permanently. We become linked for life, forever, Mara said softly. Forever, Kael'thar confirmed. It cannot be broken except by death. We would feel each other's emotions, share thoughts when we choose to, know instinctively when the other is in danger or distress. And, he hesitated, there is an intimacy to it that goes beyond the physical. Your pain would be my pain. Your joy would be my joy. We would never be truly alone again. The intensity of it made Mara's chest tighten. To be known that completely, to be vulnerable on that level. It was everything she'd learned to avoid in her years of survival. Invisibility had kept her safe. This would strip away every defense. But the alternative was to walk away from the one connection that had ever felt right. The one person who looked at her and saw something worth keeping. What happens if I say no? She asked. Really, I mean. I know you said you'd provide for me, but what happens to you? Kael'thar's expression turned bleak. I continue as I have. I rule my empire. I fight my wars. I die eventually, having never known what it means to be truly understood. He met her eyes. But I will survive. I have survived this long. That's not living, Mara said. That's just existing. Yes, the word was barely a whisper. It is. Mara stood abruptly, moving to the windows. Beyond the alloy, stars wheeled in their ancient dance. Somewhere out there was Earth, the homeworld she'd never seen. Her parents had died trying to defend one of its colonies. She'd been raised on stories of human resilience, human courage, humanity's refusal to break despite being considered the weakest species in the Coalition. Maybe this was what that resilience looked like. Not refusing to break, but choosing to be vulnerable anyway. Choosing connection despite the risk. She turned back to find Kael'thar watching her with an expression of such hope and fear that it made her heart ache. I have one condition, Mara said. Kael'thar straightened. Name it. I don't want to forget where I came from. I don't want to become someone who looks down on people like me. People just trying to survive, people who are invisible to everyone else. She stepped closer to him. If I do this, if I become your bondmate, I need to know I can still be myself, not just some pretty ornament for your court. You would never be that. Kael'thar stood, towering over her, but his voice remained gentle. Your compassion, your understanding of what it means to struggle, that is exactly what my empire needs. What I need. I don't want you to change. I want you to help me become better. Mara took a deep breath. This was insane. 24 hours ago, she'd been scrubbing floors. Now she was agreeing to bind her soul to an emperor's for eternity. But that thread of connection between them hummed with rightness, and deep in her chest, something that had been cold for years began to warm. Okay, she said. Yes, I'll do it. The transformation in Kael'thar's expression was instant and profound. Relief, joy, wonder, emotions she wouldn't have thought possible on that stern face. He reached for her with both hands, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted his size and power. Mara Voss, he breathed. My bondmate, my gift from the universe. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she felt the bond connection flare bright between them, a warmth that spread through her entire body. I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of this choice. That goes both ways, Mara managed. Kael'thar laughed, actual laughter, deep and genuine and so unexpected that Mara found herself smiling in response. Then carefully, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. The contact sent a surge of emotion through the bond connection. His wonder at finding her, his determination to protect her, his quiet terror that this moment might not be real. And beneath it all, a loneliness so profound it made Mara's breath catch. I see you, she whispered against his mind, letting her own emotions flow back along that connection. You're not alone anymore. Kael'thar's hands tightened on her face, and for just a moment, the mighty emperor allowed himself to be vulnerable, to be seen, to be human in every way that mattered. They stayed like that, foreheads pressed together, emotions flowing between them, until a discreet chime from the door interrupted the moment. Kael'thar pulled back reluctantly. That will be Lyria. I asked her to return in 1 hour. He studied Mara's face as if memorizing it. I must attend to some official business today, but tonight there will be a formal reception. The station commander has organized it to honor my visit. You will attend with me, as my acknowledged bondmate. The thought of facing those nobles again, of standing beside him while they all watched and judged, sent anxiety spiking through Mara. Kael'thar must have felt it through their connection because his expression softened. You will not be alone, he assured her. I will be beside you every moment, and anyone who treats you with disrespect will learn why I am emperor. The steel in his voice promised consequences. Lyria will help you prepare. She has been my chamberlain for 40 years. I trust her completely. Okay, Mara said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Kael'thar hesitated, then did something unexpected. He went down on one knee again, bringing their faces level. From a pocket in his armor, he withdrew a small object, a pendant on a silver chain. The pendant itself was a star surrounded by lightning, the same symbol he wore on his chest. This is the Imperial Seal, he said quietly. It identifies you as being under my direct protection. Wear it always. It will open doors, command respect, and more importantly, keep you safe when I cannot be present. He fastened it around her neck with careful hands. The metal was warm from his body heat. "You are mine now, Mara Voss, and I protect what is mine." The possessiveness in his words should have bothered her. Instead, it sent a strange thrill down her spine. For someone who had been invisible her entire life, being claimed by the most powerful being she'd ever met felt less like a loss of freedom and more like finally mattering. "Thank you," she whispered. Kael'thar rose and moved to the door. Before he opened it, he looked back at her one more time. "1 month," he said. "In 1 month, if you still wish it, we will complete the bonding ceremony. Until then, know that you have already changed my life simply by existing." Then he was gone, and Lyria was entering with a warm smile and a determination to transform a janitor into someone who could stand beside an emperor. Mara touched the pendant at her throat, feeling the warmth of the metal, and thought about how much her life had changed in 24 hours. She'd been invisible. Now she wore the Emperor's seal, and somehow, impossibly, it felt like the beginning of something right. Outside the window, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the small human who had just agreed to change the fate of empires. But Mara Voss was no longer small. She was seen, and she was beginning to suspect that being seen might be the most dangerous and wonderful thing that had ever happened to her. Lyria spent the next 8 hours transforming Mara into someone she barely recognized. It started with education. The Sylphian Chamberlain had pulled up holographic displays showing the key players in Draxian politics, their houses, their alliances, their ambitions. Mara's head swam with names and faces. House Theron, Vera's family, powerful military tradition. House Corvin, economic might, control of 3 mining systems. House Selk, old nobility, close ties to the imperial line. Each had their own agenda, their own reasons to either support or oppose an unknown human becoming the Emperor's bondmate. "Lady Vera is your most obvious threat," Lyria explained, her musical voice patient as Mara struggled to absorb everything. "But she is not your only one. House Corvin has been pushing for economic reforms that would benefit human labor, not out of kindness but because cheaper labor increases their profit margins. They may see you as a useful tool. Do not trust their sudden friendliness." "Is there anyone I can trust?" Mara asked, overwhelmed. Lyria smiled gently. "Me, the Emperor, and perhaps a few others you will learn to recognize with time. Court politics is a game of masks. Everyone wears one. Your advantage is that you don't yet know how to play, which makes you unpredictable. Use that." Then came the physical transformation. Specialists arrived, a Karathi fashion coordinator, a Vethral cosmetics expert, even a human stylist named Chen, who looked at Mara with something approaching pity. "First human in Imperial Court in living memory," Chen muttered as he worked on her hair. "No pressure, right?" "Not helping," Mara said through gritted teeth. "Sorry." Chen's hands were gentle as he shaped her dark hair into an elegant style that somehow looked both sophisticated and natural. "Just saying, you're making history. Every human in Coalition space is going to be watching what happens to you." That thought hadn't occurred to Mara. She'd been so focused on her own survival that she hadn't considered the broader implications. If she succeeded, if she could stand beside Kael'thar as an equal, what would that mean for other humans? For the species that everyone considered weak, worthless, suitable only for menial labor? The weight of representation settled on her shoulders like a physical thing. The dress they'd chosen was a compromise between Draxian formal wear and human comfort. Deep midnight blue, the same shade as the pendant now resting against her collarbone, with silver threads woven through the fabric that caught the light like captured stars. It was elegant without being ostentatious, beautiful without being impractical. Mara could actually move in it, which seemed important given that she had no idea what the evening would demand of her. When Lyria finally stepped back to assess her work, Mara barely recognized the woman in the mirror. She looked older, refined, almost regal. The exhaustion that had lived in her face for 8 years had been covered with carefully applied cosmetics, and the elegant styling made her look like someone who belonged in the upper levels of society. But her eyes were the same, brown, uncertain, human. "You look beautiful," Lyria said softly. But more importantly, you look strong. Remember that tonight. You are not a janitor pretending to be nobility. You are the Emperor's chosen bondmate, and that makes you royalty in all but title. Own it. I don't know how to own it, Mara admitted. Then fake it until you learn. Lyria squeezed her shoulder gently. Stay close to the Emperor. Follow his lead. And if anyone becomes too aggressive, remember, you wear his seal. That means you speak with his authority. Use it if you must. A chime sounded. Kael'thar's voice came through the comm system, formal but warm. Mara, I've come to escort you. Lyria opened the door, and Mara's breath caught. Kael'thar stood in the corridor wearing full imperial regalia. His armor had been replaced by robes of black and silver that somehow made him look even more imposing. A circlet of dark metal rested on his head, not a crown exactly, but close enough to signal his status. Energy crackled beneath his metallic skin, and his silver eyes glowed with intensity. But when he saw Mara, everything about him softened. You're beautiful, he said simply. Mara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Lyria did all the work. Lyria enhanced what was already there. Kael'thar stepped forward and offered his arm. Are you ready? No, absolutely not. But Mara nodded anyway and took his arm. The contact sent that now familiar warmth through their bond connection. She felt his steady confidence, his pride in her, his determination to protect her from whatever the evening brought. It helped, not enough to eliminate her fear, but enough to let her walk forward. The reception was being held in the Grand Hall on Level 5, a massive space usually reserved for diplomatic functions and major trade negotiations. As they approached, Mara could hear the hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, the subtle music of a dozen different species interacting. 2 Draxian guards opened the ornate doors. The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward them. Mara felt the weight of hundreds of stares, curious, hostile, calculating. She saw Vera near the center of the room, golden skin gleaming in the soft light, surrounded by a cluster of nobles. The fury on her face was barely contained. Kael'thar's hand covered Mara's where it rested on his arm. Through their bond, she felt his steady presence. You are not alone. I am here. The station commander, the Sylphian dignitary Mara had seen yesterday, stepped forward. Your Imperial Majesty, honored guests, it is my privilege to present His Imperial Majesty Emperor Kael'thar of the Draxian Coalition, and his acknowledged bondmate, Mara Voss of Earth. Of Earth, not the human or the janitor. Of Earth, as if she represented her entire homeworld. Kael'thar guided her forward into the room. The crowd parted before them like water. Some beings bowed. Others simply stared. Mara kept her spine straight and her head high, the way Lyria had taught her. They made their way to a raised platform where 2 chairs had been placed, one massive enough for Kael'thar, one human-sized beside it. As they sat, the room gradually came back to life. Conversation resumed, though Mara noticed how many sidelong glances came their way. You're doing well, Kael'thar murmured. Breathe. Mara realized she'd been holding her breath and forced herself to inhale slowly. From their elevated position, she could see the entire room. The various factions Lyria had described were easy to spot now, clusters of nobles, each group centered around a particularly powerful individual, each monitoring the others. And then Vera was approaching, moving through the crowd with the grace of a predator. She climbed the platform steps without waiting for permission, her golden face arranged in an expression of perfect courtesy that didn't reach her eyes. Your Majesty, she said, bowing precisely the required amount and not 1 degree more. What a surprising announcement yesterday. I hope you will forgive my initial shock. We are all still processing this unexpected development. There is nothing to forgive, Lady Vera, Kael'thar replied, his tone polite but cold. The bond is not subject to expectation or planning. It simply is. Vera's eyes flicked to Mara, and the hatred there was like a physical slap. Of course, Your Majesty. Though I confess, I find myself curious about your bondmate's background. Earth, you said? She addressed Mara directly now, her voice sweet as poison. Tell me, Mara Voss of Earth, what exactly did your family do? What house do you represent? The question was designed to humiliate. Everyone in the room knew Mara had no house, no family, No status worth mentioning. Mara felt Kelthar tense beside her, felt his anger spike through their bond. But before he could speak, Mara found her own voice. "My parents," she said clearly, "died defending Terminus Colony during the Vexar War. They were soldiers, not nobles, not politicians, just people who believed humanity deserved to exist." She met Vera's eyes without flinching. "After they died, I survived however I could. I'm not ashamed of that. Survival takes strength that I suspect you've never needed to develop, Lady Vera." A ripple of surprise moved through the nearby nobles. Vera's expression flickered, just for a moment, before returning to its mask of courtesy. "How admirable," Vera said, "though I wonder if survival skills translate well to Imperial court. The challenges here are rather more subtle than cleaning floors." "Perhaps," Mara replied, "but I've learned that most people are the same regardless of their status. Some are kind, some are cruel, some hide their cruelty behind pretty manners." She let the implication hang in the air. Kelthar's hand found hers and squeezed gently through their bond. "Well done." Vera's smile had gone rigid. "I look forward to seeing how well you adapt to your new circumstances. Imperial court can be dangerous for those unfamiliar with its customs." She turned to Kelthar. "Your Majesty, perhaps later we might discuss the trade agreements between our houses. My father is most anxious to finalize the details." "Have your father submit his proposal through proper channels," Kelthar said dismissively. "This is not the time or place for business." It was a deliberate snub, and everyone present knew it. Vera's facade cracked just enough to show the rage beneath. She bowed stiffly and retreated, but Mara saw the calculation in her eyes. This wasn't over. Not even close. Other nobles approached throughout the evening, each seeking to assess the situation, to determine where they stood with the Emperor's unexpected choice. Some were cautiously friendly. Others barely concealed their disdain. A few seemed genuinely curious about Mara herself, rather than what she represented. One of those was Lord Ven of House Corvin, a Draxian with bronze skin and an easy manner that belied his reputation as a shrewd businessman. He approached with 2 glasses of some glowing liquid and offered one to Mara with a genuine smile. "Mara Voss," he said warmly. "I wanted to introduce myself properly. I've employed many humans in my facilities over the years. Good workers, reliable, far more capable than the prejudiced would have you believe." "Thank you," Mara said carefully, remembering Lyria's warning about House Corvin. "I was actually hoping," Lord Ven continued, "that once you're settled into your new position, we might discuss improving working conditions for humans across Coalition space. With the Emperor's bondmate advocating for better treatment, who could refuse? It would be a legacy worth building." It sounded noble. It probably even was noble in part. But Mara also heard the underlying calculation. Ven saw an opportunity to improve his reputation and his business interests simultaneously. "I'd be happy to discuss it," Mara said. "Once I better understand the complexities involved. I wouldn't want to make promises I can't keep." Ven's smile widened. "Wise. I can see why His Majesty was drawn to you. Intelligence is far more valuable than lineage." He bowed to them both and withdrew. "He's not wrong," Kelthar murmured, once Ven was out of earshot. "You are intelligent, but don't trust him too quickly. House Corvin's interests always come first." "I know," Mara said. "Lyria warned me. But if his interests align with helping humans, does his motivation matter?" Kelthar considered this. "Perhaps not. That's the kind of pragmatic thinking that makes a good ruler. You see the opportunity within the manipulation." The evening wore on. Mara's feet hurt despite the comfortable shoes Lyria had provided. Her face ached from maintaining a pleasant expression. But gradually she began to relax, or at least to function within her fear, rather than being paralyzed by it. She even found herself enjoying some of it. The music was beautiful, performed by Sylphian musicians whose instruments seemed to sing with starlight. The food was incredible, not just the luxury of it, but the artistry. And watching Kelthar navigate the political currents with effortless skill was fascinating. He was cold when he needed to be, warm when it served his purposes, and absolutely immovable on anything concerning Mara's status. But then she felt it, a spike of malice through the background noise of the room. She turned to find a new arrival making his way toward their platform. He was Draxian, with skin so dark it was nearly black and eyes that glowed red instead of gold or silver. His robes were military in cut, decorated with medals and honors. Power radiated from him in waves, and the crowd parted before him with a different quality than they had for anyone else. Not respect, fear. Kael'thar's entire body went rigid. Through their bond, Mara felt a complex surge of emotion, anger, wariness, and something that might have been old pain. "General Thaxus," Kael'thar said flatly. The newcomer climbed the platform without permission, without deference, and stood before them with a coldness that made Vera's hostility seem mild by comparison. "Your Majesty," General Thaxus said, his voice like grinding stone. "I just heard the extraordinary news. You've claimed a bondmate, a human." The way he said human made it sound like a curse. "How progressive of you." "Careful, General," Kael'thar warned. "You address my bondmate." "Do I?" Thaxus's red eyes fixed on Mara with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Tell me, girl, can you command a fleet, negotiate a treaty, understand the intricacies of imperial law? Or are you simply a pretty distraction for an emperor who's grown tired of his responsibilities?" Mara felt Kael'thar's rage spike through their bond. He started to rise, but Mara's hand on his arm stopped him. If she couldn't defend herself now, she never would. This test was hers to pass or fail. She stood, bringing herself to her full height, which barely reached the center of Thaxus's chest, and looked up at him without flinching. "I can't command a fleet," she said clearly. "I've never negotiated a treaty, and I understand nothing about imperial law." She paused, letting that admission hang. "But I understand what it means to be invisible, to be considered worthless, to fight every day just to survive in a universe that doesn't care if you live or die. And I understand that power without compassion is just tyranny wearing a crown." Thaxus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those red eyes. "The Emperor doesn't need another warrior," Mara continued. "He has generals for that. He doesn't need another politician. He has advisors. What he needs is someone who sees him as a person instead of a resource. Someone who understands that ruling means serving, not just commanding." She took a step closer to Thaxus, feeling Kael'thar's surprise through their bond. "And frankly, General, if you can't see the value in that, then maybe you're the distraction, not me." The silence that followed was absolute. Every conversation in the room had stopped. Everyone was watching. General Thaxus stared down at Mara for a long moment. Then, incredibly, his lips twitched. "You have courage," he said. "That's something at least." He turned to Kael'thar. "She's insufficiently trained, politically naive, and utterly unqualified for the position you're placing her in. But she has spine. Train her properly, and she might survive long enough to matter." It wasn't approval, exactly, but it wasn't condemnation either. Thaxus turned and left the platform without another word, disappearing back into the crowd. Mara realized her hands were shaking and sat down quickly before her legs gave out. Kael'thar leaned close. "That," he murmured, "was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. Possibly both." "Who is he?" Mara whispered. "My uncle, my father's brother, commander of the Imperial fleet." Kael'thar's voice was grim. "He has never approved of anything I've done as Emperor. The fact that he didn't outright condemn you is significant." "He terrifies me," Mara admitted. "He terrifies everyone. That's what makes him effective." Kael'thar's hand found hers again. "But you stood up to him. Very few people have that courage." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. More nobles, more careful conversations, more assessing stares. But Mara felt something shifting in how people looked at her. She was no longer just an incomprehensible anomaly. She was becoming real to them, for better or worse. When the reception finally ended, Kael'thar escorted her back to her quarters. They walked in companionable silence, both exhausted but somehow energized by having survived the evening together. At her door, Kael'thar paused. "You did remarkably well tonight, better than I had any right to expect." "I was terrified the entire time," Mara confessed. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. He touched her cheek gently, and warmth flooded through their bond. Sleep well, my bondmate. Tomorrow the real work begins. What real work? Kael'thar smiled slightly. Training you to survive Imperial Court. If I'm going to make you my Empress, I need to ensure you live long enough to wear the title, Empress. The word hit Mara like a physical blow. She hadn't thought that far ahead. Bonding to Kael'thar didn't just mean being his partner. It meant eventually ruling beside him. I can't. You can. Kael'thar interrupted gently. You just proved it tonight. Sleep. We'll discuss details tomorrow. He left her at the door, and Mara entered her quarters in a daze. The space was exactly as she'd left it, but she saw it differently now. This wasn't temporary housing. This was the beginning of her new life. She moved to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there were humans struggling to survive just as she had. Humans being overlooked, underestimated, considered worthless by the greater galaxy. And now one of those humans wore the Emperor's seal and stood at the threshold of unimaginable power. The responsibility of it was crushing. The opportunity was terrifying. And Mara had no idea if she was strong enough to bear either. But she thought about Kael'thar's loneliness, his hope, his faith in her. She thought about the possibility of changing things not just for herself, but for her entire species. And she thought about how, for the first time in 8 years, she didn't feel invisible. Mara touched the pendant at her throat and made a decision. She would learn. She would adapt. She would become whatever she needed to be to stand beside Kael'thar. Not because he demanded it, but because she chose it. The invisible woman was gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone who was beginning to believe she might actually matter. Outside, the stars continued their dance. But inside one small human heart, something that had been dormant for years, finally began to wake. Hope, and the determination to prove that the universe had been wrong about humanity all along. Mara woke to the sound of her door chime at dawn, or what passed for dawn on a space station that never truly slept. She stumbled out of bed disoriented and opened the door to find Lyria standing in the corridor with 3 attendants and an expression of gentle determination. "Good morning," the Sylphian said brightly. "Your training begins now." "Now?" Mara looked down at herself, still wearing the slip she'd fallen asleep in after stripping off the formal gown. "I just went to bed 4 hours ago." "Welcome to Imperial life," Lyria replied with sympathy. "Emperors rarely sleep more than 5 hours. You'll need to adapt," she gestured to the attendants. "These are your personal staff. They'll help you dress while I brief you on today's schedule." Mara allowed herself to be herded into the bathroom while Lyria talked through the closed door, her musical voice laying out a schedule that made Mara's head spin. Protocol lessons, language instruction. Apparently, she needed to learn at least basic Draxian. Combat training, which seemed absurd until Lyria explained that every member of the Imperial household was expected to be able to defend themselves. Diplomatic studies? History? Economics? "This is impossible," Mara called out as the attendants helped her into another elegant outfit. Practical this time, suitable for training. "I can't learn all of that." "Not immediately," Lyria agreed. "But you'll be surprised what you can absorb when your survival depends on it. The Emperor has arranged for the finest tutors in the Coalition. They'll work with your strengths and compensate for your gaps in knowledge." By the time Mara emerged, she felt slightly more human, though the exhaustion still pulled at her bones. Lyria handed her a cup of something hot and fragrant that tasted like coffee but had an energizing effect that went beyond simple caffeine. "Drink that every morning," Lyria advised. "It's a Draxian stimulant, perfectly safe for humans, and you'll need the boost." The first lesson was protocol, held in a small training room with a stern Korathi instructor named Tasmir, who looked at Mara as if she were a particularly challenging puzzle. "You are not simply the Emperor's bondmate," Tasmir explained in clipped tones. "You are the future Empress of the Draxian Coalition. Your every action will be scrutinized, analyzed, and judged. One mistake could trigger a diplomatic incident. One misplaced word could start a war." "No pressure," Mara muttered. Tasmir's reptilian eyes narrowed. "This is not a joke. The Emperor has placed enormous faith in you. Do not make him regret it." The lesson that followed was brutal in its detail. Mara learned how to bow to different ranks. The angle of her spine, the duration of the bow, the proper words to accompany each gesture. She learned which titles were used in which contexts, how to address nobility versus military personnel versus religious leaders. She learned table manners that involved 3 different utensils she couldn't name, and food she'd never seen. By the time Tasmir dismissed her 2 hours later, Mara's head was pounding and her confidence was shattered. She couldn't do this. She couldn't possibly remember all these rules, all these customs, all these ways to fail. The next instructor was worse. Lady Shira of House Velkon, a Draxian noblewoman with silver skin and ice-cold eyes, had been assigned to teach Mara the intricacies of court politics. She took one look at Mara and sighed. "A human," she said flatly. "They told me, but I didn't believe it. Very well, sit. We have much ground to cover and little time." For 3 hours, Lady Shira drilled Mara on the major houses, their alliances, their feuds, their histories. She explained the factions within the imperial court, the traditionalists who wanted the empire to remain militarily focused, the progressives who sought economic expansion, the isolationists who believed the coalition had grown too large to govern effectively. "House Theron," Lady Shira said, pulling up a holographic display of Vera's family tree, "has been allied with the imperial line for 7 generations. Lady Vera was raised with the explicit expectation that she would become Empress. Your very existence threatens not just her personal ambitions, but her family's entire power structure. She will do everything in her power to destroy you." "How?" Mara asked. "I mean, what can she actually do? Kael'thar has already claimed me as his bondmate." Lady Shira's laugh was harsh. "Child, there are 100 ways to destroy someone without ever touching them directly. Scandal, rumor, manufactured evidence of betrayal, a convenient accident that leaves you too injured to complete the bonding ceremony." She leaned forward. "Vera is not your only threat, but she is the most immediate. Watch her closely. Trust no one she sends to you. And for the love of all that's sacred, taste test everything you eat or drink." The warning sent ice down Mara's spine. "You think she'd poison me? I think she'd do whatever necessary to reclaim what she sees as hers." Lady Shira's expression softened fractionally. "The Emperor is powerful, but he cannot be everywhere. You must learn to protect yourself." By midday, Mara was mentally exhausted and hadn't eaten since the stimulant drink Lyria had given her that morning. When the combat instructor arrived, a massive Draxian warrior named Calyx with scars covering his bronze skin, Mara seriously considered just giving up. "I'm not a fighter," she told him, as he led her to a training room equipped with practice weapons and padded floors. "I've never even thrown a punch." "Then you'll learn," Calyx replied. His voice was surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he could tear apart a tank with his bare hands. "The Emperor has decreed that you must be able to defend yourself. I will teach you." What followed was 2 hours of the most physically demanding work Mara had ever done. Calyx taught her basic strikes, how to fall without breaking bones, where to aim if someone larger attacked her. He was patient but relentless, and by the time he declared the session complete, Mara was dripping with sweat and her muscles screamed. "You did well," Calyx said, handing her a towel. "For a first session, you're stronger than you look." "I don't feel strong," Mara gasped, gulping water from a flask. "Strength isn't always about muscles," Calyx said. "I watched the recording of last night's reception. You stood up to General Thaxus. That takes a different kind of strength." He studied her with interest. "The Emperor chose well, I think." It was the first genuine compliment Mara had received all day, and it nearly made her cry. Lunch was delivered to her quarters by staff who bowed and called her "my lady," and generally treated her like someone who mattered. The food was incredible, fresh ingredients prepared with care, but Mara found herself remembering Lady Shira's warning about poison and struggling to eat. She was halfway through the meal when her comm chimed. Kael'thar's voice. "Mara, are you available? I'd like to see you." Relief flooded through her. "Yes, please." He arrived within minutes, still wearing formal robes from whatever official business had consumed his morning. But the moment he saw her, exhausted, overwhelmed, barely holding herself together, his expression shifted to concern. Lyria is trying to teach you everything at once, isn't she? He said. Mara nodded, not trusting her voice. Kael'thar moved to sit beside her, and his presence was like stepping into sunlight after hours in the cold. Through their bond, she felt his steady warmth, his concern, his determination to protect her. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I asked Lyria to prepare you quickly, but perhaps I underestimated how overwhelming this would be. You were a janitor 3 days ago. Now we're trying to turn you into an empress in a matter of weeks. I can't do it, Mara whispered. There's too much. Too many rules. Too many threats. Too many ways to fail. I'm going to embarrass you. Or worse, I'm going to get myself killed because I don't know which fork to use. Kael'thar's hand found hers. Do you know what I did this morning? He asked. I attended a trade negotiation that had been ongoing for 6 months. 3 different factions, each with their own agenda, all trying to manipulate me into supporting their position. I listened to 4 hours of carefully worded arguments designed to make me doubt my own judgment. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. And through all of it, I could feel you. Your exhaustion, your fear, your determination not to give up. It anchored me, reminded me what actually matters beyond the politics and posturing. He met her eyes. You don't need to be perfect, Mara. You don't need to know every rule or remember every house alliance. You just need to be yourself, honest, compassionate, brave. Everything else, we can teach you. Lady Shira says Vera is planning to destroy me, Mara said. That I should taste test everything and trust no one. Kael'thar's expression darkened. Lady Shira is not wrong to warn you. Vera is dangerous, but she is also constrained by the same rules that protect you. She cannot move openly against someone wearing my seal without declaring herself my enemy. And whatever else she is, Vera is not foolish enough to challenge me directly. So she'll move indirectly. Yes, which is why you need to be careful. He squeezed her hand. But you're not alone in this. I have people watching Vera, monitoring her movements, tracking her allies. If she plans anything, I'll know. Mara wanted to believe that. She wanted to sink into Kael'thar's confidence and let him handle everything. But something Lady Shira had said echoed in her mind. The Emperor cannot be everywhere. Teach me, she said suddenly. Not the protocol stuff or the house alliances. Teach me how you survive. How you know who to trust. How you see through the lies. How you stay 3 steps ahead of everyone trying to use you. Kael'thar's surprise flowed through their bond. That's not something that can be taught in a single afternoon. I know, but start. Mara leaned forward. You said the bond lets us share thoughts, right? Show me. Show me how you see the world. For a moment, Kael'thar hesitated. Then he shifted closer to her, his hand moving to cup the back of her neck. This might be intense, he warned. The bond isn't fully formed yet, but we can use what's there. Are you certain? Mara nodded. Kael'thar closed his eyes, and Mara felt the bond connection between them flare bright. Then, suddenly, she was seeing through his eyes, or something like it. Not literally his vision, but his awareness, his perception. The room looked the same, but she could feel layers beneath the surface. The surveillance systems built into the walls, the guards stationed outside maintaining protective patterns, the comm networks carrying thousands of conversations simultaneously. She felt Kael'thar's consciousness tracking all of it, processing information at a speed that should have been impossible. But more than that, she felt his emotional landscape, the constant calculation of threat and opportunity, the exhaustion that came from never being able to fully relax, never being able to trust completely, the isolation of power, knowing that everyone who spoke to him wanted something, that every relationship was transactional except her. In Kael'thar's mind, Mara existed as a point of light, pure, genuine, uncomplicated by ambition or agenda. She was the only thing in his universe that felt real rather than performed. The intensity of it overwhelmed her, and she pulled back, gasping. Kael'thar released her immediately, his expression concerned. Too much? He asked. No, just different. Mara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart race. You're so alone. Even surrounded by thousands of people, you're completely alone. I was, Kael'thar corrected gently. Not anymore. The simple truth of that statement settled between them. They sat in silence for a moment, both processing what they'd just shared. "Show me again," Mara said, "but slower this time. Teach me how to see what you see." They spent the next hour working together, Kael'thar carefully guiding Mara through his perceptions. He showed her how to read body language, how to catch the micro-expressions that betrayed true emotion, how to track the flow of power in a room. It was exhausting but fascinating, like learning a new language but one spoken in gesture and intention rather than words. "You're a natural," Kael'thar said finally. "Your years of being invisible taught you to observe. You just need to learn to trust what you're seeing." A chime interrupted them, Lyria's voice through the comm. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but there's a situation that requires your immediate attention." Kael'thar's expression shifted instantly from teacher to emperor. "What situation?" "A ship has arrived from Draxian space. Your aunt, Empress Dowager Saraline, has come to meet your bondmate." Through their bond, Mara felt Kael'thar's complex surge of emotion, respect, wariness, and something that might have been dread. "I see. Prepare a proper reception. I'll be there shortly." He looked at Mara. "I need to handle this, but I want you to come with me." "Your aunt?" Mara asked. "My father's sister. She was Empress before my mother, and after my mother died, she became the power behind my father's throne. She's formidable." Kael'thar stood, offering his hand. "She'll want to assess you personally. This will not be a friendly meeting." Mara took his hand and stood, ignoring the protests from her exhausted muscles. "Will she be as bad as Vera?" "Worse," Kael'thar said honestly. "Vera wants to destroy you. My aunt will simply decide whether you're worthy or not. If you fail her assessment," he trailed off, but Mara could feel his concern through their bond. "What happens if I fail? She'll demand I choose someone else. And while I could refuse her, the political fallout would be significant. She commands enormous respect among the traditionalists." He squeezed her hand. "But you won't fail. You stood up to Thaxus. You can handle Saraline." Mara wasn't nearly as confident, but she nodded anyway. They made their way to the docking bay, a different one than where Kael'thar had arrived, smaller but no less carefully secured. A ship was just finishing its docking sequence, sleek and black, with the imperial crest emblazoned on its hull. "Stay close," Kael'thar murmured. "Follow my lead. And remember, you're my bondmate. That gives you status regardless of what Saraline thinks." The airlock cycled open. What emerged was a figure that made even Kael'thar seem young. Empress Dowager Saraline stood 8.5 feet tall, with skin the color of aged bronze, and eyes that glowed with a deep amber intensity. She wore robes of black and gold, and her presence carried the weight of decades spent ruling one of the most powerful empires in known space. Behind her came an entourage of attendants and guards, but Mara's attention was fixed on the Empress Dowager herself. Power radiated from her in waves that felt different from Kael'thar's, more refined, more controlled, but no less absolute. Saraline's gaze swept the docking bay, taking in everything in a single glance. When her eyes landed on Kael'thar, her expression softened fractionally. "Nephew," she said, her voice rich and commanding. "It has been too long. Aunt Saraline." Kael'thar bowed, not deeply, but enough to show respect. "Your presence honors us." "Does it?" Saraline descended from her ship, moving with a grace that belied her age. Her eyes found Mara, and the assessment in that gaze was like being weighed on scales of cosmic significance. "I came because I heard a rumor so outrageous I could not believe it without seeing for myself. They say you've claimed a human as your bondmate. Surely this cannot be true." "It is true," Kael'thar said firmly. "Allow me to present Mara Voss of Earth, my bondmate and the future empress of our empire." Saraline approached Mara slowly, circling her like a predator examining potential prey. Mara forced herself to stand still, to meet those ancient amber eyes without flinching. "A human," Saraline said, her tone unreadable. "Small, young, untrained." She reached out and tilted Mara's chin up with one finger, studying her face. "What could you possibly offer an emperor that countless noble houses could not provide?" Mara knew this was a test, knew that her answer would determine whether Saraline became an ally or an enemy. She thought about what Kael'thar had shown her, how he saw the world, the loneliness at its core. "I offer him truth," Mara said quietly. "I don't want his power or his wealth. I don't have a house to advance or an agenda to push. I just see him, not the Emperor, him, and apparently that's rare enough to be valuable." Saraline's eyes widened fractionally. Then, incredibly, she smiled. "She has courage," the Empress Dowager said, releasing Mara's chin. "And she speaks her mind, rather than telling me what she thinks I want to hear. That is already more than I can say for most courtiers." She turned to Kael'thar. "The bond recognition is genuine?" "Absolutely," Kael'thar confirmed. Saraline studied them both, her ancient gaze seeing far more than Mara was comfortable with. "Then perhaps the universe has more wisdom than I credited it. Very well. I will not oppose this match." Relief flooded through Kael'thar, strong enough that Mara felt it through their bond. "However," Saraline continued, and her tone sharpened, "if this girl is to become Empress, she must be properly trained. Not this rushed nonsense Lyria is attempting. I will take personal responsibility for her education." Kael'thar's relief transformed to wariness. "Aunt, that's not necessary." "It is entirely necessary." Saraline's gaze pinned him. "You are my nephew and I love you, but you are also young and prone to romantic notions. The Empire cannot afford an Empress who doesn't understand how to wield power. If Mara Voss is to stand beside you, she must be forged into someone capable of surviving Imperial court." She looked at Mara. "This will not be pleasant. I do not coddle my students, but if you survive my training, you will be strong enough to face any challenge." Mara looked at Kael'thar, silently asking for guidance. Through their bond, she felt his conflict. He didn't want to subject her to his aunt's notoriously harsh methods, but he also recognized that Saraline's training would give Mara the best chance of survival. The choice was hers. Mara thought about Lady Shira's warnings, about the threats waiting in the shadows, about the responsibility she'd taken on not just for herself, but for every human watching, to see if one of their own could rise above what the galaxy expected. She turned back to Saraline. "When do we start?" The Empress Dowager's smile was sharp as a blade. "We start now. Say goodbye to your bondmate, girl. You won't see much of him for the next 3 weeks." Mara's stomach dropped, but she nodded. Kael'thar pulled her aside, his hands cupping her face gently. "You don't have to do this," he murmured. "We can find another way." "No," Mara said. "She's right. If I'm going to do this, really do this, I need to be strong enough to stand on my own." She managed a weak smile. "Besides, what's 3 weeks compared to forever?" Kael'thar's expression was pained, but he nodded. "I'll be here when you need me. Always. Just reach through the bond." He kissed her forehead gently, and Mara felt the warmth of his presence flood through their connection. Then Saraline was gesturing impatiently, and Mara had to follow. As she walked away with the Empress Dowager, Mara glanced back once. Kael'thar stood alone in the docking bay, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. Then the doors closed, and her real education began. "First lesson," Saraline said, as they walked through corridors Mara didn't recognize. "Power is not given. It is taken, and those who hesitate to seize it will be destroyed by those who don't. Do you understand?" "I think so," Mara replied. "Wrong answer." Saraline stopped and turned to face her, amber eyes blazing. "Never say 'I think' to me. Either you understand or you don't. Uncertainty is death in Imperial court." Mara swallowed hard. "I understand." "Better," Saraline resumed walking. "Second lesson, everyone is your enemy until they prove otherwise. Trust is a luxury you cannot afford. Even Kael'thar, for all his good intentions, cannot protect you from every threat. You must learn to protect yourself." Over the next hours, Saraline dismantled everything Mara thought she knew and rebuilt it according to her own brutal philosophy. There were no kind instructors here, no gentle encouragement, just harsh reality delivered without mercy. By the time Saraline finally dismissed her to sleep, Mara was mentally and physically exhausted. But as she lay in her bed that night, reaching through the bond to feel Kael'thar's distant presence, she realized something. For the first time since this began, she didn't feel like she was drowning. She felt like she was learning to swim. And if she could survive Empress Dowager Sarah Lyne's training, she could survive anything the galaxy threw at her. The invisible woman was gone. In her place, something stronger was being forged. And 3 weeks from now, Mara Voss would emerge ready to stand beside an emperor, or she would break in the attempt. There was no third option. 3 weeks passed like 3 years. Sarah Lyne's training was relentless, brutal, and utterly transformative. She stripped away every weakness, every hesitation, every moment of self-doubt that Mara had carried. The education went far beyond what Lyria had attempted. Sarah Lyne taught Mara how power actually worked, not just its surface mechanism. Politics is theater, Sarah Lyne explained during one particularly grueling session. Everyone performs a role. The trick is recognizing which role someone is playing and why. Watch their hands, not their faces. Listen to what they don't say, not what they do. And always, always know what they want before they ask for it. They studied real scenarios, recordings of actual court interactions where Sarah Lyne paused the playback and demanded Mara identify who held power, who was being manipulated, where the true threats lay. At first, Mara failed constantly, but gradually she began to see the patterns, the subtle shifts in body language, the careful placement of words, the way information flowed through invisible channels of influence. Combat training intensified. Calyx had taught Mara the basics, but Sarah Lyne brought in advanced instructors who taught her how to kill with precision. Not because she would need to, guards existed for that, but because, as Sarah Lyne explained, knowing you can kill gives you a confidence that changes how others perceive you. Language lessons filled her evening. Mara learned not just Draxian, but the formal dialects used in court, the subtle variations that signaled status and intention. She learned the ancient ceremonial phrases required for religious functions, the military terminology used in fleet command, the economic jargon that dominated trade negotiations. But the hardest lessons were the ones about herself. You still see yourself as a victim, Sarah Lyne said bluntly during their second week. A survivor, yes, but ultimately someone to whom things happen rather than someone who makes things happen. That ends now. You are not a janitor who got lucky. You are the Emperor's bondmate, and that makes you one of the most powerful individuals in known space. Own it. I don't feel powerful, Mara admitted. Because you're measuring power wrong. Sarah Lyne leaned forward, amber eyes intense. Power isn't about physical strength or fleet command. It's about understanding what people want and controlling whether they get it. You have the Emperor's ear. That means you have the ability to elevate or destroy anyone in this empire. That is power. Learn to wield it. The worst part was the isolation. Sarah Lyne had meant it when she said Mara wouldn't see Kael'thar for 3 weeks. They were kept apart, allowed only minimal contact through their bond connection. Mara could feel him at the edge of her awareness. His concern, his faith in her, his determination to give her the space she needed to grow. But she missed his physical presence, missed the warmth of his touch, missed the way his voice made her feel safe. On the night of the 19th day, Sarah Lyne summoned Mara to her private quarters, a space that was sparse but elegant, filled with artifacts from decades of imperial rule. "Sit," Sarah Lyne commanded, gesturing to a cushion across from her. Mara obeyed, noting with some pride that she no longer felt intimidated by the Empress Dowager's presence. Respect, yes. Wariness, certainly, but not fear. Sarah Lyne smiled slightly, as if reading her thoughts. You've done well. Better than I expected, if I'm honest. When Kael'thar first told me he'd bonded to a human janitor, I thought he'd lost his mind. But I understand now what he saw in you. What did he see? Mara asked. Potential. Sarah Lyne poured 2 glasses of something amber and offered one to Mara. You had nothing, which meant you had nothing to lose. That kind of freedom creates a particular kind of strength, the willingness to risk everything because you understand that anything is better than nothing. She sipped her drink. Most nobles grow soft. They have so much to protect that they become paralyzed by fear of losing it. But you're still hungry, still willing to fight. That makes you dangerous in the best possible way. Mara tasted the drink, some kind of liquor that burned pleasantly. You're saying I'm dangerous? The most dangerous kind of person is one who's been powerless and suddenly gains power. They remember what it's like to have nothing. They don't take their position for granted, and they're willing to burn the entire system down if necessary because they know the system was never built for them anyway. Saraline's smile widened. Yes, girl. You're dangerous, and that's exactly what this empire needs. I don't want to burn anything down, Mara protested. Not yet, but you will. When you see how deeply the corruption runs, how many beings suffer under systems designed to keep them powerless, you'll want to change it. And as Empress, you'll have the power to do exactly that. Saraline leaned forward. That's why I pushed you so hard. Not to break you, but to forge you into someone strong enough to actually make a difference. Mara sat with that for a moment. 3 weeks ago, she would have dismissed such talk as fantasy. But now, after everything Saraline had taught her, she could see the possibilities, the leverage points where power could be applied, the ways systems could be reformed from within. The bonding ceremony is in 5 days, Saraline continued. After that, there's no going back. You'll be permanently linked to Kael'thar, elevated to Imperial Consort, and thrust into the center of galactic politics. So I need to ask you one final time. Is this truly what you want? Not what Kael'thar wants, not what I want, what you want. It was the first time anyone had asked Mara that question directly. Even Kael'thar, for all his gentleness, had been asking her to accept him rather than asking what she wanted for herself. Mara thought about her life before, the invisibility, the exhaustion, the grinding poverty that had defined every day. She thought about the reception, where she'd faced Vera and Thaxus, the terror and exhilaration of standing her ground. She thought about the hours spent learning to see power, to wield it, to shape the world rather than just surviving in it. And she thought about Kael'thar, the loneliness in his eyes, the way he'd knelt before her, the warmth of their bond connection that made even Saraline's brutal training bearable. Yes, Mara said firmly, this is what I want. Not because he's an emperor or because of the power it brings, but because for the first time in my life, I feel like I matter, like I can make a difference. And because, she paused, searching for the right words, because he sees me, the real me, not who I'm supposed to be, and I see him the same way. That's worth fighting for. Saraline nodded slowly. Good answer. Then there's one more thing you need to know before the ceremony. Her expression turned grave. House Theron has not been idle these past 3 weeks. Vera has been gathering support, making alliances with other nobles who resent Kael'thar's choice. There will be an attempt to disrupt the bonding. Mara's stomach tightened. What kind of attempt? I don't know specifics. My intelligence network has picked up whispers, preparations, movements of resources, but Vera is being careful to avoid direct involvement. Whatever happens, she'll have plausible deniability. Saraline's amber eyes hardened. You need to be ready. The ceremony will be held in the royal sanctum aboard Kael'thar's flagship. Security will be tight, but no defense is perfect. Stay alert. Trust your instincts. And remember everything I taught you. Will you be there? Mara asked. Of course. I wouldn't miss watching my nephew finally claim his happiness. Saraline's expression softened fractionally. And I'll be watching your back. Whatever Vera has planned, she'll have to go through me first. The reassurance helped, but Mara's mind was already racing through possibilities. An assassination attempt seemed too obvious. Killing her would make Vera the primary suspect. Sabotage of the ceremony itself? Manufactured evidence of some betrayal to turn Kael'thar against her? A scandal designed to make the bonding politically impossible? Stop, Saraline commanded. I can see you spiraling into speculation. That way lies paralysis. You cannot defend against every possible threat. Trust in your training, trust in Kael'thar, and trust in yourself. That will be enough. Mara nodded, forcing herself to breathe. When can I see him? Kael'thar, I mean. Tomorrow. The formal reunification before the ceremony. But tonight, rest. You've earned it. Saraline stood, indicating the meeting was over. Then, surprisingly, she reached out and squeezed Mara's shoulder, a gesture of almost maternal affection. You've made me proud, girl. Not many could have survived what I put you through. You're ready. Mara returned to her quarters, feeling both exhausted and energized. She reached through the bond connection, feeling Kael'thar's presence stronger than it had been in weeks. Soon, she thought toward him. Soon came his response, warm as sunlight. The next morning, Mara woke to find an entirely new wardrobe had been delivered, not training clothes but formal attire suitable for an imperial consort. She chose something elegant but practical, remembering Saraline's lessons about projecting power through appearance. Lyria arrived to escort her, the Sylphian's expression pleased. "You've changed," she observed as they walked. "You carry yourself differently." "Saraline's training," Mara replied. "More than that, you look like you belong here now." Lyria smiled. "The Emperor will be pleased." They arrived at a private garden dome, an artificial space filled with real plants from a dozen different worlds, a luxury that must have cost a fortune to maintain on a space station. And there, standing among the flowers with his back to them, was Kael'thar. He turned as she entered, and Mara's breath caught. 3 weeks apart had felt like 3 years. And seeing him now, the way his silver eyes lit up with joy, the way his entire posture shifted from formal to open, made her realize how much she'd missed him. Lyria tactfully withdrew, leaving them alone. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Kael'thar crossed the space between them in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. The physical contact after weeks apart was overwhelming. Mara buried her face against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart, and let herself just be held. "I missed you," Kael'thar murmured into her hair. "Every moment of every day." "I missed you too," Mara said. "But Saraline was right to separate us. I needed to learn to be strong on my own." Kael'thar pulled back slightly to look at her face. "You're different, not just in appearance, something deeper." "I'm not afraid anymore," Mara said, realizing it was true as she spoke. "Or rather, I'm afraid, but I'm not letting the fear control me. Saraline taught me that power is about choice. I choose to stand beside you. I choose to face whatever comes, and I choose to believe I'm worthy of this." "You are worthy," Kael'thar said fiercely. "You always were. I just wish you hadn't needed 3 weeks of brutal training to see it." "I needed it," Mara insisted. "Not just to survive court politics, but to believe in myself. To see myself as something other than a victim or a survivor." She touched his face, feeling the warmth of his metallic skin. "Thank you for giving me the space to become who I needed to be." Kael'thar's hand covered hers. "The ceremony is in 4 days. Are you ready?" "Yes. But Saraline warned me. Vera is planning something." Kael'thar's expression hardened. "I know. My intelligence network has been tracking House Theron's movements. They're being careful, but something is definitely being planned." He pulled Mara closer. "I have increased security around the royal sanctum. No one will get through without my explicit authorization. You'll be safe." "I'm not worried about myself," Mara said. "I'm worried about you. If Vera can't get to me directly, she might try to hurt you instead." "Let her try." Kael'thar's voice carried the steel of absolute command. "I have survived assassination attempts before, and now I have something to actually live for, which makes me far more dangerous than when I was merely surviving." They spent the next few hours together, walking through the garden, talking about everything and nothing. Kael'thar told her about the political maneuvering that had consumed his time during their separation. Mara told him about Saraline's training, the lessons learned, the strength gained. "My aunt terrifies most people," Kael'thar observed, "but she seems to respect you." "She does," Mara confirmed. "She told me I'm dangerous, in a good way, apparently." Kael'thar laughed, genuine, warm laughter that made Mara's heart ache with affection. "Dangerous. Yes, I can see that. You've gone from being invisible to being one of the most watched individuals in the Empire, and you're handling it better than anyone could have expected." "I had good teachers," Mara said. "And good motivation." She squeezed his hand. "Tell me about the ceremony. What actually happens?" Kael'thar's expression turned serious. "We'll enter the royal sanctum, a chamber aboard my flagship that's been specially constructed to amplify psychic energy. The space itself is designed to facilitate bonding. Once we're inside, we'll initiate the connection, opening ourselves completely to each other." He paused. "It will be intense. Every memory, every emotion, every secret thought will be visible. There's no hiding, no pretense. If there's anything you don't want me to know, There isn't, Mara interrupted. My life has been difficult, but I'm not ashamed of it. You'll see everything, the poverty, the survival, the fear. But you'll also see why I chose you. Why I'm willing to risk everything for this. As you'll see my life, Kael'thar said quietly. The decisions I've made, the lives I've taken, the compromises I've accepted for the sake of my empire. I am not without darkness, Mara. There are things I've done that might change how you see me. Mara touched his face gently. I already know you've done difficult things. You're an emperor. But I also know you carry the weight of those decisions, that you don't make them lightly. Whatever darkness you have, I'm willing to accept it, because I see the light, too. Kael'thar closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. Through their bond, she felt his relief, his gratitude, his overwhelming love for her. The emotion was so strong it made her chest tight. 4 more days, he whispered. And then you're mine forever. 4 more days, Mara agreed. And then we face whatever comes together. The next 3 days passed in a blur of final preparations. Mara was fitted for ceremonial robes, not a dress, but something closer to armor, black and silver with the imperial seal embroidered across the back. Saraline supervised everything personally, ensuring no detail was overlooked. Vera will make her move during the ceremony, Saraline said with certainty. It's the only time you'll be vulnerable. When you and Kael'thar are fully open to each other, your defense is down. She'll use that moment to strike. What can we do? Mara asked. Be ready to fight even when you think you're safe. Keep part of your awareness external, monitoring for threats, and trust your instincts. Saraline's amber eyes were grave. The bonding itself cannot be interrupted once it begins. Doing so would cause permanent psychic damage to both of you. So whatever happens, you must complete the ceremony, no matter what. The warning sent ice down Mara's spine, but she nodded. I understand. On the morning of the ceremony, Mara woke before dawn. She went through her morning routine mechanically, trying not to think about all the ways today could go wrong. Lyria arrived with the ceremonial robes and a reassuring smile. You look terrified, the Sylphian observed. I am terrified, Mara admitted. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Lyria helped her into the robes, adjusting the fit until it was perfect. But remember, fear and courage aren't opposites. Courage is what you do despite the fear. By the time Mara was ready, a shuttle had arrived to transport her to Kael'thar's flagship. The ship, named Imperial Justice, was massive, one of the largest vessels in the Draxian fleet. As their shuttle approached, Mara could see its weapons arrays, its shield generators, the fighter bays that could launch hundreds of attack craft. This was power made physical, and she was about to become part of it. The shuttle docked in a private bay where Saraline, Lyria, and a full honor guard waited. They escorted Mara through corridors that gleamed with polished metal and hummed with barely contained energy. Crew members they passed immediately stood at attention, their expressions showing a mix of curiosity and respect. Finally, they arrived at the entrance to the royal sanctum. The doors were massive, 20 feet tall, carved with ancient Draxian symbols that glowed with their own inner light. This is as far as we go, Saraline said. From here, you enter alone. Kael'thar will be waiting inside. She gripped Mara's shoulders firmly. Remember everything I taught you. Be strong, be vigilant, and know that I'm proud of you. The unexpected praise made Mara's eyes sting. Thank you for everything. Survive this, Saraline said, and then change the galaxy. That's all the thanks I need. The doors opened silently. Beyond was a chamber unlike anything Mara had ever seen. Circular, maybe 50 feet in diameter, with walls that seemed to be made of pure light. Energy crackled through the air, raising the hairs on Mara's arm. In the center of the chamber stood Kael'thar, wearing robes that matched hers, his silver eyes glowing with anticipation. Mara stepped through the doors. They closed behind her with a sound like a thunderclap. Mara, Kael'thar said, and his voice echoed in the charged air. You came. Did you think I wouldn't? Mara walked toward him, feeling the energy in the chamber intensifying with every step. I hoped, but I wouldn't have blamed you if you'd changed your mind. Kael'thar held out his hand. This is the last chance to walk away. Once we begin, there's no going back. Mara took his hand without hesitation. I don't want to go back. I want to move forward. With you. Kael'thar's smile was brilliant. Then let us begin. He guided her to the center of the chamber where two cushions waited. They sat facing each other, knees almost touching, hands joined. The energy around them crackled louder. Open your mind to me, Kael'thar said softly. Let down every defense, every barrier. Let me see all of you. Mara closed her eyes and did exactly that. The bond connection between them, which had been a warm thread at the edge of her awareness, suddenly blazed into a torrent. She felt Kael'thar flooding into her consciousness, his presence overwhelming, all-encompassing, and simultaneously, she poured into him, her entire self flowing through their connection. His memories became her memories. She saw his childhood, the weight of expectations, the loss of his mother, the harsh training that had forged him into an emperor. She felt his first battle, the terror and exhilaration of combat. She experienced the loneliness of command, the isolation of power, the decades of searching for connection that never came. And he saw her, the war that took her parents, the years of survival on countless stations, the daily humiliations and exhaustion of being invisible. He felt her hunger, her fear, her desperate determination to simply keep existing. But beneath the difficult memories, they found the truth of each other. Mara saw Kael'thar's compassion, carefully hidden beneath the Emperor's mask. His desire to make his empire better, to protect the weak, to be worthy of his power. His capacity for love, so long denied, now focused entirely on her. And he saw her strength, not the kind that came from training, but the resilience that had kept her alive through years of hardship. Her refusal to become bitter despite having every reason to. Her ability to see the humanity in others even when they saw none in her. Her courage to step into the light when invisibility had been safer. The bonding deepened, and Mara felt their consciousnesses beginning to merge. Not losing herself, but becoming something more. Two separate beings choosing to become permanently intertwined. That's when she felt it. A wrongness at the edge of her awareness. Something foreign, invasive, trying to penetrate the sanctum's walls. Her eyes snapped open. Kael'thar, I feel it, he said grimly, his own eyes blazing with silver light. Vera, she's trying to disrupt the ceremony. The energy in the chamber fluctuated wildly. Through the translucent walls, Mara could see shapes moving, guards fighting something, energy weapons firing, an attack on the ship itself. We have to stop, Mara said. We have to help. No. Kael'thar's grip on her hands tightened. If we stop now, the disruption will cause permanent damage to us both. We have to complete the bonding. Trust the guards. Trust Saraline. Trust that we'll survive this. Mara wanted to argue, but she could feel through their half-formed bond what breaking the ceremony would do. Madness, psychic fragmentation, loss of self, death, essentially, even if their bodies survived. Then we finish it, Mara said. Together. They closed their eyes and dove back into the connection, ignoring the chaos outside. The bonding intensified, their consciousnesses weaving together more tightly. Mara felt Kael'thar's absolute trust in her, his willingness to be vulnerable, his commitment to protecting her with everything he had. And she gave him the same in return, her trust, her vulnerability, her promise to stand beside him no matter what came. The energy in the chamber reached a crescendo, and then, like a puzzle piece sliding into place, the bond completed. Mara gasped as her awareness suddenly expanded. She could feel Kael'thar as if he were part of her own body, his heartbeat synchronizing with hers, his emotions flowing seamlessly into her consciousness. They were still two separate people, but they were also something more. Two souls permanently intertwined, bonded at a level that transcended physical reality. Through their bond, she felt his overwhelming joy, his relief, his fierce protective love. And he felt hers in return, the wonder of finally belonging somewhere, the security of knowing she would never be alone again, the love that had grown from respect into something far deeper. The energy in the chamber began to stabilize. The light in the walls dimmed to a soft glow, and then the doors burst open. Saraline stood there, her ceremonial robes scorched and torn, energy weapon in hand. Behind her, Mara could see bodies, attackers in nondescript armor, all down. It's done, Saraline said, satisfaction in her voice. Vera sent mercenaries. We stopped them, but she's gone to ground, probably already denying any involvement. Her amber eyes found Mara. Are you intact? Is the bond complete? Mara stood slowly, still adjusting to the overwhelming new connection with Kael'thar. Yes, we're bonded. Then it's finished. Saraline smiled grimly. Vera failed. Whatever happens now, the bond cannot be broken. You are officially the Emperor's consort. Kael'thar rose, pulling Mara to her feet. Through their bond, she felt his fury at the attack, his determination to make Vera pay, but also his joy at their completed bonding, his relief that they were both safe. Vera will answer for this, Kael'thar said, his voice carrying absolute command. Attacking during a bonding ceremony is the gravest possible offense. She's given me the excuse I needed to move against House Theron. Carefully, Saraline warned. House Theron has powerful allies. If you're going to strike, make it decisive. Oh, I will, Kael'thar promised. Then he looked down at Mara, and his expression softened. But first, I want to enjoy this moment. For years I searched for you, and now you're mine. Ours, Mara corrected, feeling the bond pulse between them. We belong to each other. Through their connection, she felt his agreement, his love, his commitment to building a future together. They walked out of the royal sanctum together, hand in hand, permanently bonded. The crew members they passed dropped to their knees, not just in respect for the Emperor, but in acknowledgement of their new Empress. Because that's what Mara was now. Not a janitor, not a survivor, not even just a bondmate. She was Empress, partner to the most powerful being in the Draxian Empire. And she had the strength, the training, and the determination to be exactly what her people, all her people, human and alien alike, needed. The formal reception following the bonding was held in the Imperial Justice Grand Hall. Every major house had sent representatives. The chamber was packed with nobility, all eager to assess the new Empress and determine how her rise to power affected their own positions. Mara entered beside Kael'thar, wearing her ceremonial robes, her head high. She could feel every eye in the room on her, but she no longer felt the crushing weight of their judgment. She was bonded now, permanently connected to power, and more importantly, she believed in herself. The crowd parted before them. Some beings bowed deeply, others merely inclined their heads, a subtle test of respect that Mara noted carefully. Through her bond with Kael'thar, she could feel his awareness of every political calculation happening in the room. They took their places on the raised dais. Kael'thar gestured for attention, and the room fell silent. I present to you, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, Empress Mara of Earth, my bonded consort, partner in power and purpose. His silver eyes swept the assembly. She stands beside me by right of bond, the most sacred connection our civilization recognizes. Any who offer her disrespect offers it to me. Any who threaten her declares themselves my enemy. Is this understood? A chorus of affirmations filled the hall. Mara saw Vera in the crowd. The golden-skinned noblewoman looked furious but carefully maintained a neutral expression. She had failed to stop the bonding, and now she faced an empress who knew exactly who had tried to destroy her. Lady Vera of House Theron, Kael'thar called out, his tone deceptively mild. Approach. The crowd went silent. Vera's face went pale, but she stepped forward, climbing the dais steps with rigid dignity. She bowed, precisely the required depth, no more. Your Majesty, she said carefully. There was an attack during the bonding ceremony, Kael'thar said. Mercenaries attempted to breach the royal sanctum. They failed, of course, but their employer remains unknown. His eyes bored into Vera. Do you have any information that might help identify who would commit such a grave offense? It was a trap. If Vera claimed knowledge, she implicated herself. If she denied knowledge, she looked either ignorant or complicit. I know nothing of such an attack, Your Majesty, Vera said finally, but I am horrified that anyone would attempt to interfere with a sacred bonding. Are you? Kael'thar's voice was soft, dangerous, because House Theron has been very vocal about its disapproval of my choice. One might think someone in your house felt strongly enough to act. Your Majesty, I swear on my house's honor, Your house's honor is exactly what concerns me, Kylthar interrupted. House Theron has served the Empire well for generations. It would be a tragedy if that service was tarnished by the actions of one impulsive member. He paused, letting the implication hang. I'm sure your father would agree. Perhaps you should return home and discuss with him how House Theron can demonstrate its continued loyalty to the Empire. It was an exile in all but name, a public humiliation that stopped just short of outright accusation. Vera's face went rigid with suppressed rage, but she bowed again. As your majesty commands, she forced out. She turned and left the dais, her posture brittle with fury. The crowd parted before her, and Mara could see the calculations happening. Nobles reassessing their alliances with House Theron, reconsidering their positions now that the Emperor had made his displeasure clear. Let this be a lesson, Kylthar announced to the assembled crowd. The Empress is under my direct protection, but more than that, she represents something new. A future where power is not determined solely by lineage but by merit, where those who have been overlooked might finally be seen. He turned to Mara, offering his hand. She took it and stood beside him, equal in height now on the raised dais, if not in physical stature. My Empress, Kylthar continued, has survived what would have broken most beings. She has proven herself through trial and training, and she will help me build an empire that serves all its people, not just the powerful. His voice hardened. Those who resist this vision will find themselves left behind. Those who embrace it will prosper. Choose wisely. It was a declaration of intent, a promise that things would change, and backed by the Emperor's absolute authority, it carried the weight of law. The reception continued for hours. Nobles approached to offer congratulations, each one carefully assessing Mara, trying to determine how much power she actually wielded. Some were sincere, others were calculating, but all of them recognized that she was now a force to be reckoned with. Lord Ven of House Corvin approached with a broad smile. Empress Mara, he said warmly, I hope you remember our conversation. I would still very much like to discuss improving conditions for human workers across the Empire. I remember, Mara said, and I'd be happy to discuss it, but not as a favor to you, Lord Ven. As a priority for the Empire. Humans deserve better than they've been given. That's going to change, whether it profits you or not. Ven's smile faltered slightly, but he bowed. Of course, Your Majesty. I look forward to working with you. Even General Thaxus approached, the terrifying uncle who had tested Mara at the first reception. He studied her with those red eyes, then did something surprising. He bowed, deeply. Empress, he said, you have proven yourself worthy. The Empire is stronger for your presence. It was the closest thing to approval Mara suspected she'd ever get from him, and she accepted it with dignity. As the reception finally wound down, Kylthar guided Mara away from the crowd to a private observation deck. Through the transparent alloy, they could see the stars wheeling in their eternal dance. How do you feel? Kylthar asked, his arm around her waist. Through their bond, he already knew. He could feel her exhaustion, her satisfaction, her lingering anxiety about what came next. But he asked anyway, letting her put it into words. I feel like I just climbed a mountain, Mara admitted, and discovered there's another mountain waiting on the other side. There will always be another mountain, Kylthar said. That's what power means. Constant challenges, constant threats, constant decisions. But, he pulled her closer. We climb them together now. You don't have to be strong alone anymore. Mara leaned into him, feeling his warmth, his steady presence through their bond. What happens now? Vera's been sent away, but she's not defeated. House Theron will regroup, and there are probably a dozen other nobles watching to see if I succeed or fail. Then we don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you fail, Kylthar said. We move forward with reforms. We prove that your elevation wasn't just about the bond, but about actual change. We make the Empire better. That's a tall order, Mara said. Yes, but we have time, and we have each other. Kylthar turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face gently. I meant what I said in there. You represent something new, a future where power serves rather than dominates, where beings are valued for what they contribute, not just what they were born into. That's revolutionary, and it terrifies the old guard. It terrifies me too, Mara admitted. What if I'm not strong enough? What if I make mistakes that hurt people? You will make mistakes, Kael'thar said. I've been emperor for 72 years, and I still make mistakes. But your compassion, your understanding of what it means to struggle, that will guide you toward wisdom the old guard lacks. Trust yourself. Through their bond, Mara felt his absolute faith in her. It should have felt like pressure, but instead it felt like wings. Okay, she said. Then let's change the galaxy. Kael'thar smiled and kissed her forehead gently. That's my Empress. They stood together on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there were humans still struggling, still invisible, still considered worthless by the greater galaxy. But now, one of their own stood beside an emperor, and together they would prove that humanity, and any being willing to fight for a better future, deserved to be seen. The invisible woman was gone. In her place stood an Empress, and the galaxy would never be the same. Epilogue. 6 months later, Mara stood in the assembly hall on Draxia Prime, addressing the Coalition Council for the first time. The chamber was vast, filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds, all watching as the human Empress prepared to speak. Through her bond with Kael'thar, who sat on his throne watching with pride, Mara felt his steady support, but she didn't need it. She'd found her own strength. I stand before you as proof that change is possible, Mara began, her voice carrying through the chamber. 6 months ago I was invisible, considered worthless, deemed suitable only for service work. Today, I am Empress of the Draxian Coalition. That transformation happened not because of my lineage or my wealth, but because one being looked at me and saw value where others saw none. She paused, letting that sink in. I propose a new initiative, the Recognition Act, a reform that will extend full citizenship rights to all species within Coalition space, including humans. No more client species, no more second-class beings, just individuals valued for their contributions rather than their origins. The chamber erupted in debate, some supporting, others objecting. But Mara stood firm, backed by imperial authority and her own hard-won confidence. The vote would be close. The resistance would be fierce. But Mara had learned from Saraline, had been forged by hardship, and was bonded to the most powerful emperor in known space. She would win, eventually, because she had learned the most important lesson of all. Power wasn't about dominating others. It was about lifting them up, about seeing the invisible and giving them voice. And Mara Voss, once a janitor, now an Empress, would spend her life ensuring that no one remained invisible again. The universe had tried to make her small. She had become infinite instead. And that made all the difference.